Hello and welcome to the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Friends. I'm Bill McMorris from the Washington Free Beacon and filling in for Leon Wolf. And let's get right ahead and introduce our panel. We have Leon Wolf of Red State. We have Joy Behar from the Ace of Spades Decision Desk. Neal Dewing from the Federalist. Stephen Gutowski from the Washington Free Beacon, and filling in for Scott Lincicome, who is out with an erection that lasted longer than 4 hours. We have Matthew Walther. Thank you so much for being with us, everybody. Hope you are having as terrible a week as I am having, and the only person who's really having a worse week than I am is Hillary Clinton. Hillary Clinton, of course, has seen her approval rating plummet over the past week, and she has seen an insurgent devout socialist in Bernie Sanders shoot up in the polls. So wanted to turn to Jeff on this question because he is our polling guy. Jeff, what is to explain for the rise of Bernie Sanders in the Democratic caucus?
Boredom. It's your one-word explanation. Boredom is pretty much it. Bernie Sanders has no chance of actually taking the nomination, although he could win Iowa or New Hampshire. Those are very white states without significant minority populations. The reason Sanders is getting traction is because, as we've all expected, nobody's really enthusiastic about Hillary Clinton. Nobody really likes her that much. They just sort of accept her as inevitable. But the problem is that she still has a very strong devotion among the true base of the Democratic primary electorate, which are minorities, women and minorities, but particularly minorities. So when the race, if, for example, for some reason Bernie Sanders should pull off an upset in one of the first two primary states, it's going to move to South Carolina. A full, I believe, 40%. 50% of the South Carolina primary electorate in the Democratic side is African American. Those people aren't going to be voting for Bernie Sanders, who is the whitest Wick Whiterson that ever had a white skin in his life, and he comes from the whitest state in the entire union in Vermont. The funny thing is, and I've been talking with some other people about this, is that if someone like Joe Biden were to get into the race, we think of him as a clown, because he's a clown, actually. But somebody like that would have much better chance of actually drawing on minority voters than someone like Bernie Sanders, who ultimately is quite a niche candidate. He's more like a Bill Bradley or a Howard Dean than he is a John Kerry or a Hubert Humphrey. So if a guy like Biden gets in, that could be where Hillary is really in trouble. We're going to see what happens, because Biden's been making some noises that he might run. And if he does get into the race, which I still don't think he will, but if he does get into the race, then I think you're going to see some actual panic on Team Hillary's side, because that's when she can start bleeding the people that she's really counting on to give her an easy ride, even if things go terribly pear-shaped in those first two states.
Now, Leon, Jeff touched on something that I've been thinking about, and that's the candidacy of Martin O'Malley. Does the weakness that Bernie Sanders has exposed in the Clinton machine, the fact that it is possible to triangulate, move to the left, and get support, do you think that's going to boost O'Malley or Biden's chances to disrupt this nomination, this inevitable nomination, just like happened to Hillary in 2008?
I don't think so, because I think that O'Malley's natural base of support is essentially a total overlap with Hillary's natural base of support. I think that more or less, he plays to the same audience with the same themes and really the same message style as Hillary. I don't see where he picks up anybody different. I mean, if there is going to be a guy who's going to come in on the Democrat side, it is going to have to be somebody who does represent really and truly a fresh, revolutionary new way of thinking. Now, listen, fresh and revolutionary, not two words anybody's going to use to describe Bernie Sanders anytime soon, but for better or worse, the guy is the spirit animal of the modern Democratic Party. And I think that if it's going to be anybody, I mean, I think Bernie Sanders stands a much better shot, really, quite frankly, of pulling off a surprise and then getting, Eugene McCarthy in the general election than anybody else out there in the field, including O'Malley, including guys like Biden and so on and so forth. I maintain, as I've said for a long time, that if Elizabeth Warren gets in, that Hillary is in serious trouble, and that would present a greater threat to us in the general election than Hillary does, because she comes in with a lot of the same positives and without any of the negatives. But thankfully, I think it looks like Hillary has scared her out of the field, and that's all to the better for us.
Now, Matthew, let me pose this to you. If we have a Bernie Sanders Donald Trump election, will you sit it out, or are you going to stay in?
Oh, I don't vote anyway. So, yeah.
Feel free to elaborate.
I voted in 2008, and I've regretted it ever since. And I'm not going to play that Mugs game again. If you force me to vote in that matchup, though, I'd vote for Sanders because my wife likes him.
Why does your wife like him? Is your wife, I guess, the demographic that Bernie Sanders is chasing?
Yeah, Whole Food shopper.
Now, Neal,
we get the nice pink salt.
I've never seen pink salt in my life. Neal, as somebody who totally dresses like he shops at Whole Foods,
yes,
weigh in on this. What is the biggest embarrassment to happen thus far in the presidential election? It seemed like it was going to be Cruz all the way with you. Have things gotten that much worse?
Let me just say, this is kind of a big deal for me. I want to phrase this properly. I support Ted Cruz over Donald Trump. I would, if it came down to a choice between Ted Cruz and Donald Trump, I'd have to choose Cruz. And I think I would do it with a clear conscience. The most embarrassing thing about 2016 so far has been the traction that Donald Trump has gotten. Now, for whatever reason, for whatever valid points he may be making, whatever voice he may be giving to legitimate issues, he's a clown. He makes us look stupid. And it's this adolescent impulse, I think, to reject the GOP establishment, kind of walk into your bedroom, slam your door, and shout, "You don't understand me, and you're not even my real dad." It's that kind of impulse, I think, that's given us Donald Trump. So if I really had to, I would say right here, right now, I support Ted Cruz if it's a choice between him and Donald Trump.
Now, Stephen, Sean Davis over at the Federalist actually raised a very valid point, and that's the fact that Bernie Sanders is a man who has said that a lack of orgasms is the root cause of cervical cancer. And the press just lets him slide, whereas the press can't get enough of putting Donald Trump's Looney Tunes ideas out there. Is this
Wait a second. Bill, excuse me. Is he not wrong? Is he not wrong?
I don't know.
Before we condemn.
That's a good point. I haven't checked out the research as to why your wife developed cervical cancer, Joy. So Stephen, why is it that the media has seized on our silliest ideas and our silliest candidates, and they make our clowns representative of our entire ideology, and Bernie Sanders, Hillary Clinton, they never seem to get drawn in by their insane people?
Well, it seems pretty obvious to me. That's because the media is full of liberals, and they want to make conservatives and Republicans look like idiots, and so it's much easier. They enjoy reporting on Donald Trump and the insane things that he says, and they don't really care about what insane things Bernie Sanders says. I mean, he's sort of like their crazy uncle. Like, they don't want to, he's funny, he's weird, he has a terrible hairstyle. That's all they really care about. But he's sort of on their side, so they're not going to be poking around at him too much.
Now, I love the fact that you said he makes us look silly. What am I looking at in your background?
Hey,
it looks kind of silly.
This is a professional
what is
set
that?
for Games and Guns, the show that I host, as opposed to the beer in the background of the Budweiser.
That's a classic.
I have an AR here. It's got a sword.
All right, noted. I'll stop making fun of you now that you've brandished the AR.
So, right?
So coming back around to coming back around to Jeff, you have pimped out Red Steez's fantastic write-up on Trump. Can you condense his argument for us, just in case any BATF listener is thinking about voting Trump? Why shouldn't friends let friends do it?
Okay, well, you can find Steve's piece at The Wilderness, which is his website, and his argument is a little different than the standard line that you'll see on conservative sites and conservative Twitter, where it's like, well, Trump is giving a voice to the voiceless, he's saying the things that people won't say. Steven just dismisses all of that out of hand, and he says, listen, no, this is more of a media phenomenon. It is a desperation for clicks and for sort of buzzy relevance on the Republican side that we have not had and that we see and almost want to have a pale simulacrum of. Because we look at what happened with Obama in 2008 and 2012, and Trump offers the same sort of like Kardashianized, down and dirty, stupid kind of stuff that gets clicks, even if it's bad kinds of clicks, and it gets attention, and it's fun, and people want to pay attention to it. And in a media that is driven by ratings, by hits, by clicks, and things like that, a guy like Trump is just going to be catnip. And it really has less to do with the things that he is saying than with the fact that he's a clown show, and people want to turn out to the circus to see the clown. I think actually the term, just by the way, the term that Steven uses, which I think is accurate, his name for Donald Trump is Fuckface Von Clownstick, and I think we should use that from now on.
So that will be the nom de guerre of.
I actually hope that's how he's. I hope that's how he's introduced in the first Republican debate.
Now, this raises a great question, Leon. Is it wrong? Are we using the wrong standard for debate participation if Donald Trump is allowed to participate?
Well, rather than answering the question that you've asked, I'm going to answer a totally different question, which is, what is the right thing that we should be calling the Trump followers? I think that this is a live debate that needs to be given full consideration. Are they the Trumpeteers? Are they the Trumpkins? Are they the Trump-ons?
No.
What is the right thing?
They're the Rumpsters.
No, the Trumpster fire that is Donald Trump. I don't know. I would go with the Trump troglodytes.
So to make an attempt at answering your actual question, and I talked about this a little bit a couple of weeks ago. Listen, I think that in an ideal world, we would all have a level of trust in Reince Priebus and the GOP to kind of step in and say, you know what, this guy is not really a Republican, despite having filed as a Republican. He's a repeat donor to Democrats, including to our expected opponent in the general election. Furthermore, he says these things that will serve only to embarrass the other GOP candidates who were on the stage with him. And so I'm going to make an executive call here to have him off the stage, but the fact is that the voters don't have that level of trust for good reason. And I think that if that precedent is set, then the next time it'll be Neal Doing's favorite guy, Ted Cruz, who he says shouldn't be on the stage, or it'll be somebody who we all like and who has a valuable voice, even if they don't have a chance of winning. So I think, though, that Trump is going to perform a valuable service on the stage, which is that he's going to be an interesting kind of pinata for someone to take apart on the stage, and I think that he's going to say a lot of the same things that Hillary Clinton would otherwise say, and so this will provide a good excuse or a good chance for us to see which of the Republicans in the field can do the best job of eviscerating him on live television as kind of a practice dummy for Hillary in the general.
Now, he is a personal friend of the Clintons. The Clintons showed up at his wedding. Matthew, what are the chances that the Democratic Party has put Trump out there for us?
Well, yeah, I forgot I have a real point to make about Trump. I checked in with Ron Paul's website. I think he's got the right analysis, which is that Trump is probably a false flag operation. I can't tell whether the Clintons are behind it, or my reading is actually that that the Bush people are behind it. They're trying to discredit immigration restrictionism. Some of us just say, look, unrestricted immigration is driving down wages for blue-collar workers in the post-industrial Midwest. Trump says they're raping our women. False flag operation, definitely. 10 out of 10 for Ron.
Hey, when you're talking about false flag operations, can you really, truly rule out the Fed? I mean, because they have their fingers in everything.
Yeah. Or the Illuminati.
My money's on the Illuminati. Speaking of people who are having a terrible week, it's generally blue-collar workers in the post-industrial Midwest, but it seems that the Chinese House of Cards economy is now finally being exposed for the blatant fraud that it was. Neal, weigh in on this. I mean, China has pretty much shut down almost all of its stock market at this point. Are we seeing China's, I guess, meteoric rise based on nothing but projection and evidently cooked books? Or what kind of effect is that going to have on not only the global economy, but in the U.S. election in particular?
Well, I doubt it's as dramatic as some would hope. I think it's natural that we'd expect some sort of leveling effect for China's economy, because they do manipulate their currency, and they do have there are certain trade imbalances there, that make them that give them an unfair advantage. And so, but the essential thing to keep in mind is we rely on China for cheap imports. It's a major part of the global economy. Your razor blades are made with Chinese steel. Your staples, your paper clips are made with Chinese steel. It just goes into all sorts of stuff. We send China our junk, and they turn it into our cheap Walmart products, and that allows our relatively less affluent citizens to enjoy a quality of life it's been unheard of in human civilization. Do we want China to collapse like a house of cards? Absolutely not. Ideally, China would abandon communism and free up their markets a little bit. Competition between us would be fairer and freer. That's one of the possible benefits of the TPP, by the way, is getting China somewhat accountable to international standards, and that's something that I think kind of got lost in the shuffle of that whole debate. So yeah, what can we expect? I hope we will expect to see a little bit more transparency, a little bit more accountability from China, and perhaps the beginning of negotiating a fairer and freer trade situation.
Now, Stephen, there are some of us, like myself, who would love nothing more than to see China collapse as the awful regime that it is. Does that, but I guess the downside, as far as I can tell, would be the fact that they hold all of this debt from the United States. If they go down, are they going to call it? Are they going to say, hey, U.S., by the way, all those trillions of dollars in treasury bonds that we bought from you guys, can we buy them? Can we cash them out? Are you worried about that?
No, I'm not really worried about how much debt the Chinese hold. Mainly because, I mean, people look at it as sort of they own us kind of thing, but it's that old saying of like, you owe the bank $1 million, they own you. You owe the bank $100 billion, you own the bank. So I mean, what can they do? I mean, I just don't see any sort of real long-term stability, even from this stock market readjustment over there in China, or their faux stock market that they have, which is really controlled by the government anyway. That's why here, the New York Stock Exchange closed because there was a computer glitch. Over there, it closed because the government thought that the prices were getting too low. But I should say that I am one of those people mentioned earlier that is poor and shops at Walmart for the ability to buy great things for very cheap prices. So I'm not terribly upset with that exchange as it currently stands.
Understood. Walther, you don't feel strongly one way or the other on China's use of slave labor to undermine the American worker, right? You're just kind of about it. Talk to us, Michigan.
Right. No, I mean, this is the real reason I would vote for Bernie Sanders. Look, I think it's revolting that people are being paid slave labor wages so that we can buy these shitty $10 toasters and that break after 6 months and then buy another one. You know, I hearken back to the days when, you know, my grandfather would go and buy a toaster that he would have for the next 50 years and make the same toast out of with his, you know, Folgers coffee every morning. You know, not any boutique stuff. And, you know, those toasters were made by people who were able to send their kids to college on what they made making those toasters. I think that we've embraced the cheap and the crappy, and in doing so, we've enabled a lot of nastiness over there in China.
I will make a counterpoint to Matthew just very briefly. Slave wages are better than no wages and starving to death under one of Mao's 5-year plans. So I think the Chinese got a good end of this deal.
Fair enough.
Debatable. All right. So speaking of communism, the Pope received a rather odd gift today. Leon, can you tell us about it? Break it down for us.
Oh my gosh! Listen, of course, Bill puts me on the spot here. The Catholics just love it when I lecture the Pope here. Listen, it was a bizarre, and I don't want to comment too much on the Pope's aspect of this because for those who haven't seen it, it's a video, and the Pope is presented with, and I'm not a Catholic, so a lot of the intricacies are apparently lost on me, with a crucifix that essentially has a hammer and a sickle in it, basically commemorating communism. And it's difficult to see.
No es bueno.
Yeah, no, it's difficult to see. I haven't had anybody conclusively say what the Pope's response is. It's not 100% clear in the video. What I do know,
he said
is
no. He was
clearly displeased. He was displeased. I think it's clear that you can see from the video he was not happy with it. That said, I would have to say if somebody had tried to do that with John Paul II, they would have been lucky to leave with all their limbs. That's what I would have preferred to see. But then again, I'm not a Catholic, and so I try not to lecture the Catholics on what they should expect from their Pope in terms of these reactions.
Well, I have no such compunctions. I have no such compunctions as an Episcopalian. I have no real religion at all. So I feel completely liberated to tell people, especially Catholics who may otherwise be devoted to the Pope, that he should have kicked Evo Morales in the balls right then and there for that. Because I think it was, I can't remember who it was who pointed to that on Twitter, that handing the Pope a crucifix made out of a hammer and sickle, of all things, is the most amazingly symbolic thing that you could have done, given how much communist nations crucified Christianity and persecuted it over the last 100 years. It was nothing more than an outright insult, and I mean, it's basically, you know, it's the equivalent of spitting in the man's face. I mean, he handled it like a gentleman because he's going through.
Well, it's interesting, I think, because we still have a living Pope Emeritus, Benedict, and the contrast between what people would try to pull with Benedict versus what they feel empowered to do with Francis is telling.
Whose fault is that, Neal? Whose fault is that?
No, I think it's a lesson.
Hey, I'm the one asking the questions here. What's going on? Leon, know your role.
I think it's a lesson for Francis in that there's a reason that popes don't just speak off the cuff as he is prone to do, because it gives people the wrong ideas about you and about what you can really be approachable or movable on. You know, it's like when Francis tosses off, "Who am I to judge?" about gays, that is international headlines. It becomes a driving force in the narrative about blah, 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 blah. So it's just people are very willing to co-opt the Pope's moral authority to serve their secular political ends, and the communists are no different. They've always wanted to do that. I think they explicitly tried to do that back in the day, and they made some inroads with the church hierarchy. So it's a very dangerous prospect, and so Morales is obviously a tool and a stupid one at that. So he did this obvious thing, which was maybe intentionally meant to embarrass the Pope as well. There's that too. There's a lot of factors at play, but I don't think anybody would have tried that with Pope Benedict. I just don't think. I think he projected that like, don't mess with me.
Let me say, can I interject one more thing here? Let me interject one more thing. It was mentioned that this was basically to spit in the Pope's face. I think that would have been true of John Paul, who was an actual survivor of communism. I don't think, and I can't say for sure that Morales necessarily knew that that's how it would be perceived. I mean, let's be honest. Argentine Catholicism is not all that strictly divorced from communism in practice. I mean, am I wrong? I mean,
no. I said, they made some inroads, and maybe someone else wants to jump in here about it. But yeah, there's that aspect.
No, wrong, Neal. This is a fault. France is running another false flag operation. All this stuff, all those comments, who am I to judge and all that stuff, he did that just so that he could pull the rug out from under the left's feet with his raucously illiberal encyclical, which suggests that people are talking about someone being to the right of Genghis Khan, like he's come in the encyclical. He sounds like a guy who, it was a return to the Catholicism that was pre-liberal, lowercase l. He rejects modernity.
You're talking about the Laudato Si encyclical.
Yeah, he rejects technology and modernity and all of its evils.
Mm-hmm.
He was just getting people prepared for this.
You're right about that. Actually, for all the hubbub about his encyclical, it was not this, Gaia worshipping crank blog post thing that people thought it was going to be. It was, in fact, a rejection of a lot of the perils of modernity and consumerism and materialism and that sort of thing, which was actually sort of a good point to make. But again, we have a secular media and we have secular authorities who are going to co-opt the Pope's words and cherry pick what he says in order to get their own policies, some support among the sheeple, as it were, to borrow from the Ron Paul people again.
This is my problem. When the Pope comes this fall to Washington, D.C., you've been charged by the Free Beacon to design our gift. What are you going to give him? Are you going to present him with Jesus on that AR-15 behind you?
That would be a pretty good Free Beacon gift to the Pope, honestly. Yeah, I'm not Catholic, so I don't have to listen to the Pope or the weird things he does. Not that I actually kind of like this Pope half the time, and then obviously have the same problems with him that everybody else here does when he speaks off the cuff. But I really enjoyed some of the more personal stuff he's done while he's been in office. I don't, what do you call it? Been Pope, I guess. I don't know. Some of the more personal gestures he's made to people. That's nice to see. But a lot of this off the cuff weird stuff about people who manufacture guns are bad and the weird thing with the crucifix and on the hammer and sickle. I didn't really understand. I really want to see what his official reaction to that was, because I've seen both things where some people are saying he was like smiling when he got it, and then some people are saying that he was like disgusted by it and thought it was inappropriate. It's clearly inappropriate.
I read the latter, but that he was disgusted and said no the second he saw it. But
I hope so.
But
I
Leon,
think
what did you think?
So let me speak to something that Stephen said, because I mean, I'm Methodist, so like essentially Jeff, I almost have no religion. But that having been said, I think that this idea that Stephen put forth, well, I'm not Catholic, so I don't have to care about what the Pope says, is erroneous in a lot of respects, because and the Southern Baptists are going to hate me for saying this, but like it or not, to a lot of the world, the Pope is the foremost representative of Christianity on earth. I mean, he just is. He's the most visible. He's the most influential. He's the most covered by the media. So even though when he speaks on doctrine, he doesn't speak for me. When he speaks, I mean, his words carry weight that the head of the United Methodist Church, who I don't even know who it is, quite frankly, doesn't carry that weight. Nobody gives a crap what they say. So it does matter, I think, what the Pope says about these things, and I just wish that he would understand that the people that he talks to are people who are not friends of the core tenets of Catholicism. They are looking essentially to make his words into a weapon that essentially encourages people, and especially kind of marginal Catholics, to vote Democrat. I mean, that's their whole goal, and I just wish that he would be more cognizant of that. That's all.
Yeah. I mean, I agree with that for the most part. I mean, like I said, that's why I enjoy when he has these personal moments, and he's very Christ-like in the way that he interacts with the sick or the needy. I like seeing that from him. I just, as far as when he speaks on doctrine or theology, it's just, as someone who's not a Catholic, it's something that even non-Catholics should read and respect and consider, but it's not something that drives the way that I practice my faith.
Now, the Pope obviously has no influence whatsoever on the Supreme Court of the United States. I'm going to turn to the lawyers here. Jeff, tell me why Obergefell is the worst.
I don't know what Obergefell is, but through your drunken haze, you may have been intending to say the words Obergefell, which is the actual case that was decided about a week and a half ago when we were on hiatus. This is the big gay marriage case. And it's funny that the Pope has no influence on the Supreme Court, by the way, because the overwhelming majority of Supreme Court justices are actually Catholics. I believe Kennedy, Scalia, Alito, Thomas, and also Sotomayor are all Catholics, but they sure don't always act like it. Obergefell is a terrible decision, not because I think anybody else here has any animus towards homosexuals or towards the idea of gay marriage. I think we're all pretty okay with it. It was just a terribly written majority decision, which even, and this is the thing that amused me actually.
Not okay with gay marriage, but...
Well, I mean, okay, fine. You're right. Actually, I can understand opposing gay marriage, but none of us have any animus towards gay people per se. Actually, I really go back and forth on the issue myself, but mostly for prudential reasons. But I thought it was really funny is even Brian Beutler, who is the hackiest hack that ever hacked a hack out of a hackson, he wrote the same thing in the New Republic and said that, whether you like the outcome or not, Kennedy's decision was just a piece of airy, windy garbage, just written in this flowery, stupid style. There was no equal protection analysis. There was no substantive due process analysis in the case. It was just a bunch of airy nostrums that Scalia, actually, clearly not making himself any friends in the court, just lanced like a boil in his dissent, where he actually said, like, yes, well, the majority decision with its striving for meaningful phrases, and it's just like, that's nasty. But the real problem with the Obergefell decision is the one that Justice Roberts pointed out. We got angry at Roberts with King v. Burwell when he declined. He wrote the majority decision upholding the subsidies. He wrote maybe the best decision so far in his Supreme Court career when he wrote his dissent for Obergefell. And he pointed out that there's absolutely nothing in terms of precedent, at least, that prevents the majority in Obergefell from recognizing polygamy next, which you still think won't happen because the truth of the matter is the Supreme Court decides things on the basis of public opinion, and all of the stuff that they use as precedent is really just window dressing. But that's a damn shame, because if you actually interpreted the Obergefell majority decision just as it was written, there's no reason to say that, okay, well, anybody should be able to marry anybody else, and we can't, get into the way of these truly sacred and holy and unknowable bonds of love. But that this love is really just between one person and another person. Why does it have to be 2 people and not 3 people or 4 people or 5 people? So plural marriage, the walls are left up right now. And they won't come down immediately because, again, I think the court reacts to public opinion. But it's just such a horribly kind of a terrible precedent to leave in our wake.
Now, Leon, you're a lawyer. And I understand Jeff's point regarding how quickly the walls seem to fall down. Scalia predicted all of this in the Texas sodomy case a decade ago, that there would be no room left for any moral legislation. So I guess is the mask off on what the gay marriage movement was about?
Well, and I think that and if you read back to Scalia's dissent,
the answer is yes, Leon.
Yeah, I mean it really is. And I think that's an important point that Scalia raised in his dissent in the I'm so sleep deprived right now. I can't remember if it was Bowers or what the one that went the other way. Anyway, what he says is, look, the Constitution makes it clear that the federal government, by and large, is not in the business of legislating morality, and the reason for that is that's a state function. I mean, that's specifically reserved to the states to do. And people say stupid things all the time when they comment about the law. They say, "Oh my gosh, the government can't be in the business of legislating morality." Yes, they do. They do it all the damn time. Laws making murder illegal, that's a law that legislates morality. Okay, it is not understood throughout all of history and all of cultures that murder is always wrong. That's our judgment as Americans, as Westerners, that we have imposed and we put a criminal sanction on. Laws saying that theft is illegal, that's a law basically legislating morality. There are tons of those laws that exist, and people who say that are just idiots who don't understand basically the number of laws that reflect moral judgments, because I think things like murder and theft are automatic things. Well, where does that come from? It comes from our shared sense of morality that we've enacted into law, and it's very frustrating to see. And I don't know where the end of the road. It's incredibly depressing to me. And I am a same-sex marriage supporter, in the sense that if it comes up in a ballot initiative, I'm gonna go vote for it. But this decision is an embarrassment. It is not a legal issue. It is a political issue, and it was infuriating to see in a lot of ways how the court reached its decision.
Scalia's footnote was the best thing I've ever read, where he said, "I would literally rather put my head in a bag than join, even as the 5th vote in a close case, a decision that was written as poorly as this." And I can't even conceive of the kind of anger that has to motivate that rage in a written Supreme Court opinion.
Now, Matt Walther, you are a gay icon. As a gay icon, tell us, what was your reaction to...
Well, I thought it was fabulous, the clear reach out to Bonnie Tyler that we got there. I mean, I was tweeting that day. I must have put about 7 or 6 links that Friday to Total Eclipse of the Heart. Marriage responds to the universal fear that a lonely person might call out only to find no one there. That's really sweet and moving, I thought. You don't think so?
Turn around, every now and then I get a little bit lonely and you're never coming around.
I just want to promise our viewers that next week I'll be back in the hosting chair. So
Is anybody left after that beautiful rendition?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I think Joy has a great voice.
Can I say that what really bothered me, beyond everything that's already been said about the gay marriage decision, was the proximity to the Obamacare decision, in which oh, sorry, all I see is Jeff's singing bass. But the proximity there, where in the Obamacare decision, Roberts argues that it's the intent of Congress that really matters there, not what the law actually said. And then we turn around and we get Kennedy, and he's saying that suddenly the 14th Amendment all along legalized gay marriage, It's just that no one in 1863 realized this at the time, and so clearly, I think the credibility of the court really suffered between those two rulings, and for me, I mean, not that that's you look back at the cases, the famous cases throughout the history of the court, and you kind of wonder how much credibility it really has anyway as an institution. But to me, like I really thought it damaged whatever credibility is left with the court. Where it's so clear that now it's just whatever the five justices believe, whatever their politics are. That's what the decision's going to be. So. I think in those two in a row was really embarrassing.
Now, Neal, when this decision came down, I put the over/under at 3 months for how long it would take the left to start going after the tax exemption of religious institutions.
Yeah.
It took
2 days. Yeah.
Sorry, I got muted, Aaron. Thank you very much. It took 2 days for them to turn around and try to take away tax exemptions. Is this a powder keg that's giving off sparks?
I hope so. Actually, the way this has gone, everybody has been trying to split the baby here and say, I support same-sex marriage, but I don't like the way the decision was reached. Fuck you. I mean, for God's sake. What is marriage? Is marriage one thing, or is it another thing, or is it everything? I mean, I am an unabashed social conservative. I don't believe that it can be marriage in an ontological sense. Marriage is a thing. And just whatever same-sex marriage is, it is not marriage to me. So I'm never going to accept it. And there are a lot of people who are like me, who for reasons of conscience, for reasons of logical consistency, for reasons of not wanting to update the dictionary, just will never accept the definition of marriage to include same-sex relationships. And what we have and what we've seen is the power of the state being brought to bear against people like that, regressive Neanderthals or unreconstructed people who simply are trying to live according to the dictates of their conscience. That's not allowed to happen anymore. And we are going to see conflict. It's going to be legal challenges. It's going to be societal pressure. It's going to be people sort of shunning the witch kind of deal. Yes, there will be conflict. And eventually, I think Christians may run out of cheeks to turn. And when that happens, when they're finally pushed into a corner, then I don't want to speculate on what might happen. It's not a good idea to I think there's a concept in war where you give your defeated enemy enough wiggle room to surrender and keep his dignity. And what the left is doing is denying any opportunity for a dignified defeat. Yeah, we've lost. Social conservatives have lost. We know that. The culture's against us, but we want to surrender with our dignity intact. And we're not being allowed to do that. We're being hounded to the very edge. And eventually we're going to push back.
I think this is exhilarating in a way, though, because finally we can dispense with all the proceduralist bullcrap about, oh, the problem isn't that gay marriage is wrong. The problem is that the Supreme Court is usurping its constitutional role and taking away power from the states here. No, finally we can have real talk and say, as Neal was suggesting earlier, look, for some of us, marriage is an institution that involves a man and a woman. It's that simple. Finally, we can take the gloves off here and stop talking about procedure and start talking about truth. This is the mood that I'm getting from a lot of my friends who are social.
So you see it as abortion. You know, Roe v. Wade, the court thought that it was settling the abortion question, when instead they just unleashed pro-lifers onto the entire country, and that's actually 40 years on and almost 50 million lives later that our side is actually winning now. We actually have a majority.
The tide's turning on that one, and I think we're going to have dedicated people who will not give up the fight and who will outlast the current fad for redefinition of foundational concepts until society begins to experience some of the negative ramifications of that, which we're already kind of seeing a little bit of when you see gay marriage advocates have to fight off polygamy arguments using the same exact logic I was using and social conservatives were using 10 years ago, saying, oh, gay marriage, it'll never happen because of all these things.
Hey, you know what? One of the things I do respect, one of the guys who I do respect is a very socialist guy named Freddie DeBoer, who actually published an article in Politico.
Oh, he's being honest.
Being completely honest, and it's one of those things that I totally kind of opportunistically tweeted out and said, listen, this is coming next. But he made the point, he's like, listen, let's not kid ourselves. After the Obergefell decision, there's no intellectually honest way to put a chalk in the way of the wheelhouse of plural marriage. Who is playing Bonnie Tyler?
No, I totally get what you're saying here, Jeff, and we've already started to see it. I mean, Utah, the same day that a federal judge struck down Utah's state constitutional amendment mandating marriage between a man and a woman, another federal judge used Anthony Kennedy's opinion to strike down the Utah law banning polygamy. And I see these things coming again and again.
I think we're actually safer on the polygamy thing because of this will actually come down just to logistics. How do you define it? Because you're gonna, what's the limiting principle? Is it 3 people? Is it 5 people? Is it 20 people? Maybe we'll get the left to understand the concept of corporate personhood for once. If we have, polygamous unions between 50 or 100 or 1,000 people. But no, it just doesn't make it. It just doesn't make any sense. There's no way it could work. Like, and this is the last thing I'll say about this. But say you have a divorce. If one person leaves, is he or she divorcing everybody else in the union, or just divorcing the one person? And when the marriages happen in the first place, if you join on, to 6 or 7 people, are you just marrying 2 of them? It's crazy. The logistics don't make any sense.
Matt, what is your problem? Love wins, for God's sake.
Yeah, Matt, it's almost like you didn't pay attention to the Coca-Cola avatar. That's
or Tide, or Kraft macaroni and cheese, or whatever else.
Yeah, that's actually my favorite part is Anheuser-Busch. Anheuser-Busch is sitting there tweeting out rainbows. It's like, do you think that's your demographic, Anheuser-Busch? Do you please find me?
Well, they do make
a gay man who's so not fabulous that
they do make Bud Light
drinks Bud
Lime.
Light.
They do make Bud Light Lime, right?
That's a good point. All right, touche. So speaking of total judicial abandonment, a judge released Bill Cosby's previously sealed deposition for the sole reason that he became a public moralist and didn't blame the plight of the black community on cis white males. We don't have time to talk about this story. I just wanted to plug my latest piece at the Federalist. Go to the Federalist and look up Bill McMorris. You can find my fantastic write-up on this.
This is an obvious Bill McMorris vanity play, and we all knew it here on the show. We're like, why is he so interested in Bill Cosby? Oh, because he wrote a lengthy article about it for the Free Beacon.
No, for the Federalist. The Federalist. But thank you for plugging the Free Beacon for me.
Oh, the Free Beacon wouldn't accept that slop, right? So they
it is in fact a good article that Bill wrote.
Sparks. So anyway, we're going back. We're going back to real news. Matt Harvey endorsed Donald Trump's golf course today. gave him a shout out on Instagram that the Mets subsequently made him delete. So the Mets' fifth best pitcher is a coward, evidently. That's all right. We have Jacob deGrom and Steven Matz. Steven Gutowski, I'm going to go to you next to talk about how awesome the Mets are. Or you can talk about a man who was stabbed to death on the Metro and able-bodied young men watched it happen and didn't do anything. What could have saved that man on the Metro, Steven?
Okay. There was conversation on Twitter about this over if these people should have stopped the stabbing, and one woman, as a police officer, said, that's unrealistic, but they could have thrown something heavy and knocked the guy out. And I said, or they could have sent something very small but at a very high rate of speed towards him. They would accomplish the same goal. Of course, in D.C., even if you have one of these mythical permits, which are something like unicorns, since nobody in the real world can actually get one, you can't, even if you have one of those, you can't carry on the Metro in D.C. So really this guy was just screwed all along. I know that the debate, the Federalist again, go read the Free Beacon, don't read the Federalist, but the Federalist was the one who wrote about this case where saying that basically the bystanders were a bunch of beta males because they didn't rush in to stop the crazy man with the knife, and I think that's a bit unrealistic, a bit much for my taste. I don't think I would expect unarmed people to rush a crazy man with a knife.
Right.
But
I think
at the same time, they shouldn't be unarmed because DC should allow you to carry on the incredibly dangerous Metro.
Well, I think Steve's right. It's pathetic to me to watch all these guys live out their taxi driver fantasies talking about, oh yeah, I would have got that asshole, no question about it. I mean, I'll think of myself. I've been known to carry a 2,000-page dictionary on the Metro for leisure reading, and maybe in the moment I could have thought of it real quick, like some kind of Army Ranger, and clobbered the guy in the head with it. But come on, a person is dead here, and it's terrible and sad. Let's not make this an occasion for everybody tweeting and writing think pieces about their macho fantasies. And that's the last thing I'll say about it. Talking about beta males using the language of these men's rights activist freaks. That's the worst thing about it. I hated that piece.
See, I guess
Oh my God.
stuff, but Neal,
Let me interject
do we want a culture where men go on Reddit afterwards and go, I just witnessed a guy get stabbed to death and my feelings, grief is hurting.
Yes,
Neal, go ahead. Defend manliness.
That is, I think, the reaction that prompted these Federalist pieces wasn't so much that nobody did anything. It was that they didn't do anything, and then they got online and wrote about how they didn't feel bad about being unable or failing to do something. It's this thing where they excuse their inaction, and then they also turn their inaction into a good thing. There should be an impulse, and no, this doesn't apply to every person. It really doesn't, and you can't generalize too much. But there should be
shame.
There should be
sense of shame.
There should be some shame involved for a man of a reasonable physicality or someone who is present. I think we should nurture that sense of somebody has to do something about something that is going on in our society that is, or something that's happening right in front of me. And you can't always wait for the police. You can't always rely on the authorities. Sometimes you absolutely have to act in the moment. And sometimes you're going to get hurt, and sometimes you're not going to be able to actually do anything. Sometimes you're not going to be able to actually stop the guy. But the idea that we should shrug it off and say, oh, what are you going to do? There was nothing I could have done, and I don't feel bad about it. I don't think we should be too willing to accept that as the preferred state.
I'm not for shrugging it off, but but I just think that there's something masturbatory about the way that young conservatives in my social circle have responded to it online. That's my only thing. Like, it's true. Probably the best thing would have been for someone to jump in, but we don't all need to talk about what awesome shit we would have pulled off.
Well, I think hold on now. I think it's absolute bullshit that we call that impulse macho bullshit. I think that it should be something, and I think it was part of what made America great. Maybe I'm a macho asshole for saying this, that part of what was understood and what was taught to males as they grew up is that if you're one of 12 people to see someone being beat to fucking death on the subway, you step in and try to stop it from happening. I mean, that's not macho. That's just basic human decency to me. That's just something that you're taught as a man. You should be taught as a man. I have a 14-year-old kid. That's something that I teach him. I mean, I don't know.
Leon, no. You're not being a macho fool on this. This one is something I was also taught at a very early age, and it was simple. If there's a guy in front of you with a gun, you do what they say. They have a gun. You just have to accept that, all right? But if there's a guy in front of you with a knife and they're actually threatening somebody else, then you actually have a fighting chance. If you know what you're doing, and especially if the person is actually stabbing somebody else, you can take a few wounds. It'll hurt. They'll cut your hands. They could even stab you in a really unpleasant place. But my God, that's not a fatal thing. This is not a hard impulse, for me at least, to have. And I've had it before. I've intervened in fights where people had knives and bladed objects, and I have actual scars from it, but I did the right thing, and I don't regret it. And I'm nobody's idea of a macho dude, I think, as everybody who's watched this show knows. I am as nerdy as they get.
Let me jump in. Let me jump in really quickly to say I think there's the impulse to act, and then there's being prepared to act. And if you in our society doesn't kind of nurture this idea of considering what could happen, preparing for what could happen, thinking to yourself, if this happens, then I'll do that, then it's entirely understandable that people would fail to act in that situation. Because when you don't have a mental preparedness or any kind of training, you're gonna freeze. It's human nature.
Absolutely.
You're gonna just stand there and watch it happen.
You actually refuted your own point there by saying that, yeah, okay, it's okay to freeze. That's fine. We all understand that.
I'm not saying it's okay to freeze. I'm saying it's understandable.
It's understandable to freeze.
If you don't nurture that concept of preparing mentally and saying, consider what could happen.
But as you pointed out, Neal,
I think Stephen. Let's get Stephen in here.
I mean, you guys are making a lot of legitimate points about the fact that people should undertake the training necessary to intervene in these types of situations, and that the mindset should be that if I can help someone who's being attacked by a thug or a criminal, that I should be prepared to. Myself, I carry a gun every day, and if I were in a situation where I could help another person who was being attacked, I would. The thing about this situation is, first of all, these people did try to help. They called the police. They stopped. They got the conductor. They're trapped on a train car with a crazy person with a knife, and they have no means to defend themselves. And I just think it's a lot for me to look down on someone who.
There was 12 of them, Stephen. 12. It wasn't one guy. There were 12 of them. You can't tell me that those. And I understand they called the police. It's too little, too late. There's 12 of you.
And the guy's dead.
Look, I understand that, and this, we're making a lot of judgments.
You have to be out-armed to fight because ISIS doesn't think so, and yet they have cultivated a culture in which they will kill. And are we going soft? Is this it? Are we a culture to be feared if we won't even endanger ourselves?
No, but look, that's not the point. The point is, look, before I dropped out of high school, in rural Michigan in a town of 1,000 people where everybody's taught to fight everybody, and I had my fair share of scrapes and everything. Look, this impulse is not alien to me, but the first thing about a guy who is tough and ready to act in the situation. You know, the distinct characteristic, I think, is that the last thing he's going to do is go online and talk about how much he wants to beat the shit out of someone. Just be calm and reasonable, and yeah, in certain situations, let's hope that you can prepare, that you're prepared to do this kind of thing. But I don't know. Again, to me, it's just gross when someone is dead.
So you're mad at internet commenters when the people who could have intervened to prevent him from being dead didn't do anything?
Yeah, hang on. Let me say one quick thing here, Bill. I think the exact opposite of what Matt just said. I think that it's a good and appropriate thing that as a society we reinforce the idea that what these people did was chicken shit and should not have been done. I think that level of shaming should stay anytime a situation comes up like this, that people should step in. And I think that the public aspect of this, far from being masturbatory or false macho, is part of what used to go on in this country as a part of regular childhood rearing, which is reinforce the idea that you, as a reasonably capable adult male, have a duty to help and protect people who are weak, people who are in deep shit. Again, not somebody who's got a gun on the subway, but if there's 12 of you and a guy with a knife, you should have the stones to be the one to take the initiative and step in and do something about it. Hey, you know what? You can call the people who are saying this, keyboard jockeys, and they weren't there all you want, whatever. If it reinforces the belief that next time this happens, somebody steps in and stops a guy from getting beat to death and stabbed to death on the subway in front of 12 fully capable people, then I'm all for it.
Neal, you have the last word. Go.
I think it comes down to this, the old saying, be polite, be professional, and have a plan to kill absolutely everyone in the room.
Yes.
Neal,
Yes.
I like that. I think that's actually in the Constitution, right? That's in the 14th Amendment.
It's in the back somewhere, yeah.
Yeah, my reading of it.
There's a footnote.
Well, thank you so much, everybody, for joining us for this episode of the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Friends. I am Bill McMorris from the Washington Free Beacon.
Wait, I must interrupt. I must say one thing. Once upon a time I was falling in love, but now I'm only falling apart. Nothing I can say, total eclipse of the heart. Total eclipse of the heart.
This has been Karaoke Battle, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in. And thank you so much to my guests. And Scott Lincicome is, please pray for him. He's still in the hospital with an erection that lasted longer than 4 hours. So keep him in your thoughts, keep him in your prayers. Stephen Gutowski has a gun. He's from the Free Beacon. Matthew Walther from the Free Beacon. Neal Dewing from the Free Beacon. Leon Wolf from the Free Beacon. Jeff Blehar, unemployed. This has been the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Friends. Thank you so much to Aaron for producing. And Leon Wolf, I took your job, man. Sing every time now. Do it on your baby. This outro is taking far too long. Stephen Gutowski has disassembled the